The Shahed drone program represents one of the most consequential shifts in contemporary warfare, not because it introduces revolutionary technology, but because it systematizes mediocrity with strategic power. The Shahed family of unmanned aerial vehicles and loitering munitions illustrates how a state operating under sanctions, isolation, and industrial constraints can nevertheless alter the military balance by exploiting economic scale and endurance rather than precision or technological elegance. In this sense, Shahed drones are less a weapons program than a doctrine materialized in hardware. A doctrine that prioritizes persistence, saturation, and cost asymmetry over survivability or refinement. The program is rooted in the military-industrial ecosystem of Iran, specifically through institutions such as Shahed Aviation Industries and the state-backed aerospace sector more broadly. From its inception, the Iranian drone effort was shaped by constraint. Sanctions restricted access to advanced avionics, engines, and materials, forcing designers to rely on commercial components, improvised supply chains, and iterative reverse engineering. The environment didn't merely lift Iranian ambitions, it disciplined them. Instead of pursuing fragile, high cost systems compatible as well as comparable to Western or Israeli UAVs, Iran focused on what could be produced reliably, repaired easily, and fielded in large numbers. A decisive inflection point occurred in 2021. Pardon. A decisive inflection point occurred in 2011 when Iran captured a US RQ-170 Sentinel. The technical value of that incident has often been overstated in popular accounts, but its psychological and institutional impact was profound. It demonstrated to Iranian planners that even the most advanced systems could be compromised, dissected, and imitated. The resulting platforms such as the Shahed 171 and Shahed 191 flying wing drones were not exact replicas, they embodied a new confidence. Iran no longer saw itself as permanently locked out of high-end aerospace design. Still, these platforms remained limited in numbers and strategic relevance compared to that followed. The true importance of the Shahed program lies in the evolution of one-way attack drones, particularly the Shahed 131 and Shahed 136, and later jet-powered derivatives. The system disregard the traditional assumptions of air power. They are meant to return, not meant to survive, and not meant to be individually decisive. Instead, they are designed to be launched in waves, to fly long distances at low cost, and to force defenders into economically irrational response. A surface-to-air missile battery that costs millions of dollars per interceptor is strategically weakened when compelled to engage drones that cost a fraction of that amount. Even successful interceptions become a form of loss. The logic gained global visibility due to Russo-Ukrainian war when Russia adopted and adapted Shahed designs under the General designation. The rebranding itself was politically motivated, intended to obscure Iranian involvement, but the deeper significance lay in Russia's industrial response. Faced with high consumption rates and logistical strain, Russia moved towards domestic production, establishing manufacturing facilities far from the front lines. These factories prioritized throughput over craftsmanship, accepting wide tolerance and high value rates in exchange for sheer volume. The result was a steady attritional pressure on Ukraine's air defenses and energy infrastructure. The Shahed system thus becomes a weapon of economic warfare as much as physical destruction. Power substations, warehouses, residential buildings, and transportation nodes were not always destroyed outright, they were repeatedly disrupted. Repair crews were exhausted, air defense units were stretched thin, and civilian populations were subjected to chronic insecurity. The drone's distinctive engine noise, often described as a moped or chainsaw, acquired psychological significance, signaling incoming attack well before impact, but offering little opportunity to escape. Fear, uncertainty, and fatigue became force multipliers. Technically, the Shahed drone are unimpressive when judged by conventional aerospace standards. Navigation relies heavily on commercial GPS modules supplemented by inertial systems. Airframes are simple, often constructed from composite materials optimized for low cost rather than radar stealth. Engines range from pistons and Wankel designs to small turbojets in later variants, trading range for speed. Payloads are limited, guidance is rudimentary, and electronic countermeasures are minimal. Yet these shortcomings are irrelevant to their strategic function. The drones are good enough to reach targets, cheap enough to be expendable, and numerous enough to overwhelm defenses. Over time, the Shahed family diversified. Surveillance-oriented platforms such as Shahed 174 and strike-capable MALE and HALE drones like the Shahed 129 and Shahed 149 Gaza reflect Iran's design to maintain a conventional UAV capability alongside its attritional systems. Meanwhile, jet-powered variants such as Shahed 238 represent an evolutionary response to improved air defenses, increasing speed to reduce interception windows even at the cost of reduced energy. Each iteration reflects a pragmatic adjustment rather than a technological leap, guided by battlefield feedback rather than theoretical optimization. The production methods associated with the Shahed program further underscores its industrial logic. Investigations into labor practices at Russian manufacturing sites reveal the use of underage workers, students, and coerced forced labor. From a moral perspective, these practices are indefensible. From a strategic perspective, they reveal a system optimized ruthlessly for output under constraint. When the objective is to produce thousands of expendable weapons as quickly and cheaply as possible, ethical considerations are subordinated to throughput. This is not unique to Russia or Iran. It is a recurring feature of total or quasi-total war economics. International responses to the Shahed phenomenon was heavily focused on sanctions enforcement and supply chain interdiction. Western governments have highlighted the presence of foreign-made components in down drones, emphasizing violation of export controls. While such efforts may increase friction and cost, they have fundamentally altered the viability of the Shahed model. Commercial electronics are ubiquitous; supply chains are adaptable and redesigns can substitute components with relative ease. The resilience of the program lies precisely in its lack of dependence on specialized or irreplaceable parts. Strategically, the Shahed drones signal a broader transition in warfare towards systems that privilege endurance over dominance. They are not instruments of rapid victory, but of prolonged pressure. Against technological superior adversaries, they exploit the weakest link not in hardware but in budgets, maintenance cycles, and political tolerance of sustained disputes. Air superiority, once associated with control of the skies, is reframed as question of how long a defender can afford to keep intercepting cheap threats. In historical terms, the Shahid program belongs to a lineage of weapons that altered warfare through economics rather than brilliance, comparable to the mass-produced artillery of industrial wars or improvised explosive devices of insurgencies. Their effectiveness doesn't derive from individual performance but from the systematic impact they blurred the boundary between military and civilian domains, between battlefield and rare area, and between tactical engagement and strategic exhaustion. The long-term implications are sobering. As more states and non-state actors adopt similar models, the distinction between high-intensity war and persistent low-level attacks erode. Infrastructure becomes a permanent target set. Air defenses now become consumables rather than shields, and the threshold for sustained cross-border violence is lowered. The Shahid drone thus represent not merely an Iranian or Russian capability, but a template for future conflict in a war where precision is expensive, resilience is scarce, and endurance decides outcome.